All right, we can go ahead and get started. And then as folks trickle in, hopefully they'll be able to ask any questions. We're going to keep this very low key tonight. So if you have any questions, please go ahead and put them right in the chat, or you can ask using the Q&A button at the bottom of Zoom. Natalie has specifically said she wants us to ask lots of questions and hopefully get some good information out of her. So first of all, hi, I'm Liz. You know me, and Kristen is over here to my right. My other co-president, we are the co-presidents of the Women in Cybersecurity Military Affiliate. I'm very pleased you all could make it here with us tonight. So let's give a little bit of background on Natalie. Natalie Pittore is the chief of NSA's Enduring Security Framework, and she's responsible for leading multilateral public-private partnership efforts to address the nation's most critical cybersecurity challenges. She previously served as NSA's chief of cybersecurity communications, where she led the way for the NSA to communicate on cybersecurity. Ms. Pittore has been on the front lines of the cybersecurity mission, serving as a chief and operational director in NSA's Cybersecurity Threat Operations Center, as well as a Chinese language analyst in the United States Air Force. So she is a veteran for everyone here. Amazing. She holds a bachelor's of arts in political science and history from Chaminade University and a degree in Chinese Mandarin from the Defense Language Institute, which is so impressive. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Natalie. And just please remember, if you all have any questions, type them in the chat or just come off mute and feel free to speak.
Awesome. Thank you. Can everybody hear me all right? We're good. Okay. I don't see a lot of faces. I see black screens. So hopefully folks will turn on their camera. I told Kristen I typically have a rule in my own team that if I do meetings with you, I need to see the camera on so I can look at your faces and see your, that way, at least if you're going to roll your eyes, I can see it and, be able to react appropriately. I do want to forewarn everyone, I'm actually on leave right now with my extended family in Massachusetts. So if any children, there's like 5 of them running around at any point, run in, I'm assuming, in some way you're all familiar, whether it's siblings or children of your own or nieces or, whatever the case may be, what that life is like. So constantly multitasking, but Jess and Kelly and my friends here at NSA didn't want to miss the chance of being able to sit down with all of you and chat. I will say, as Liz mentioned, I assume you get a lot of speakers, you talk to a lot of people. If you're here, it means you're interested in growing and evolving within the field or as an individual. So by all means, I want this time to be for you. And what it is that you need out of it. And if there's questions you have, if you want to know more about personal experiences, if you want advice, this time is for you to ask that. And I'm happy to answer and even call upon my colleagues, Jess and Kelly, who are amazing women that I have the opportunity to work with. And even though may not be prior military, work a lot with our armed forces. So, but, please feel free to make this time your own. I was thinking a lot, I was running this morning and thinking of you all. And one thing I always hope for is maybe there'll be a face in the room that I know, just because you do hope that people take these opportunities in groups like WiCyS to be able to grow their network and find opportunity. But also, what I hope you get from the time and me talking to you. And one isn't obvious, I would like you all to come away with this understanding what it's like to be a veteran at NSA, what NSA does with our veteran community, and how we are really building and activating the cybersecurity mission. NSA really was there before cybersecurity, like the word was even cybersecurity in this space. And so there's a lot of opportunity, particularly for our veterans. But also, as we talk, and you'll hear a lot in my experiences, mentorship is extremely important. I know this is something WiCyS highly values. Was so impressed when I was in Cleveland, the extensive amount of emphasis that was put on mentorship. But what I think goes beyond the level is not just finding someone who will tell you, hey, go to intelligencecareers.gov and find a job, or, that kind of canned feedback. Finding people who really take the time to get to know you, like under the skin, get to know you, know what makes you tick, know what they can see you grow into and see your potential. Because for me, that was the differentiator in my career, is having folks that I worked with so closely that saw not the present state of who I was, but who they thought I could be, and continued to put those opportunities and guide me towards where I could seize opportunities and move. but also owning and really embracing those of you who, whether you're currently active, whether you're guard reserve, whether you're a veteran, whether you're a spouse, you have unique skills that you might not even realize. And it's until you really get out there and you start talking with others that you understand both how your experiences have shaped you being affiliated with the military, but also how they made you different in a good way. And it personally took me a while to get there. And I'll go into that a little bit when it comes to how I joined the military. But it was something I had to overcome. And now, it's still when I meet someone that I've been working with even for a year and they didn't know me as a military person, they're like, "You were in the Air Force?" I was like, "Why is that so surprising to people still?" Right? I'm like, women join the military, right? Like we do a lot of the same jobs you do in uniform, right? But it still surprises people, which gets me. Um, but if there's no questions, I'll just kind of just jump right in. And I wanted to give you all just a little bit of backstory of what put me on my journey in the Air Force. Unfortunately, my story is a little bit sad to start, and it actually brings me back to where I am here in Massachusetts, where I come on almost like a little mecca for myself a few times a year. When I was 17 years old, my mother passed away suddenly when I was in high school. And she had been in the Army. She was a military police. My father had been in the Army. They met at Fort Meade, ironically, where, I work now. And even though I really didn't know them as military because they separated before I was really old enough to understand, oh, my parents are in the service, right? There was still parts of that were in our household that I understood, but it wasn't until I was at Board National Cemetery having a flag handed to me that I was like, wow, this was a part of my mom's life that I didn't really take the time to get to really get to know and ask her questions. But I flew back from Massachusetts. We were living in Pennsylvania at the time. And I remember my dad and I were walking through the mall and it was kind of like, what happens now? Right. It was February, it was 2001. I was 17 and I'm thinking, okay, life has now officially changed. And what I thought I wanted to do just doesn't seem real anymore. Right. And I had to kind of reset. And we were walking and past a recruiter office and I looked at my dad and I was like, I think I'm going to join the military. He was like, what? You've never talked about joining the military. I was literally probably stereotypically the furthest thing from it. I was a cheerleader. I was, the French Club and future business leader of America and all this. I was not in any way had ever talked about anything that had to do with the service. I loved that my parents were in the service. My dad was also a police officer in DC, but I had never actually shown any interest as that might be my path. But I had looked at him and I was like, well, the reality is where mommy is buried, you can either have served or be married to someone who served. And I was not going to rely on a spouse. I think I probably worded it a little bit more, indignantly to my father. But I was like, I know I want to be buried where mommy is. And so if that means I have to join the military, I guess that's what I'm going to do. And so I joined the delayed enlistment program, which I honestly, when I went to get tested for, what's your job going to be, they were like, what's your favorite subject in school? And I was like, French. I love French. And they were like, oh, maybe you could be a linguist. Take this D lab. And I was like, all right, that sounds weird. And I called my dad after the D lab and I was like, pretty sure I'm not going to be a linguist because that test made no sense. And I probably failed it. And then they came back and they were like, so you scored really, really high. You can pick any language you want. And I was like, seriously? I'm pretty sure that test is not passable. Like it's just a joke. You're just basically seeing what I'll buy into, right? But I was like, all right, I'll take Chinese. It just seemed right. But my ship out date was actually 9/11. Waiting for my recruiter to show up at my house, and my dad calls me into the living room, and he's like, "Something's going on." And we watched, the towers go down, and I thought, "Wow, this year just keeps getting worse." And my dad looked at me and he said, "So are you still going to do this?" And I said, "Well, what kind of person would I be if I backed out now, Dad?" Right? Like I was like, clearly we're in a different environment. We're potentially going to war, but, I signed my name to a paper that said I was going to serve. It wasn't just like I was going to serve when everything's okay. And, I'm not at risk to actually do anything dangerous. Right. Um, and, and I stuck with the decision, and 6 days later, once they were allowing planes to fly again, shipped off to boot camp on the 17th of September and just started on this journey. And, when I was joining, I got talked to by a lot of people who tried to talk me out of it. Guidance counselors, principals, teachers, and they all said the same thing. And now, at the time, it actually made me feel kind of bad about myself, because it was, well, you're too smart to join the military. You should go to college like, the other smart kids do. And I was like, kind of find that offensive. Like, smart people serve, right? Like, military leaders have basically built this country. Those people weren't dumb, but it was, everyone tried to talk me out of it. And I realize now that, as you navigate a lot of these decisions you make, that there's things that become shaping and they plant seeds. And what sometimes those are positive and sometimes those are negative. And I think when I left, there was these pressures that were kind of implanted in my brain that over time, as you start to learn and watch your patterns, you realize help fed into imposter syndrome, right? Where now when I stand next to people who graduated from Harvard or Yale or Cornell or whatever the case may be, and they get to me and they're like, well, what'd you do? And I was like, well, I served 10 years active duty, right? That was my education, was 10 years in the Air Force, deploying, working different missions around the globe. There is still a part of me that's like, well, maybe, I didn't do something as impressive, because these people in the back of my mind when I was young were like, do you really want to do that? It's not for someone like you. You are not built for the military. And now when I talk to younger individuals that would otherwise not even consider service, I like to ask them why, and then talk them through all of the opportunities that they don't see because it's not actually presented to them in the right way. And, it took me time to get comfortable with, what that my path was different, but it was because it was different. And really it was because of everything endured and that I learned while I was in service that was able to make me as resilient of a leader as I am now within our cybersecurity mission at NSA. So I was lucky enough to get stationed in NSA Hawaii, where I worked a lot of our traditional military targets, nowhere near cyber at the time. But when I came back into Fort Meade, I had the privilege of working in a shop where we really started to explore counter net, the C&E, the counter computer network exploitation mission, and what it could do for us. And I remember, showing up my first day, and I had been given a choice by who was my supervisor as well as a mentor of mine that said, what do you want to do? I'd come back from a deployment where I was working very traditional counter terrorism mission that I had volunteered for. And he was like, okay, where do you want to go? And I was like, well, at the schoolhouse, you get to wear civilian clothes. That seems nice. Like, I don't want to wear a uniform for a while. I just got back from the Middle East. And he's like, nah, no. What about an NTOC, the NSA Threat Operations Center? And I was like, I can't work there. There's no space for me. He was like, what do you mean there's no space for you? And I was like, well, there's no billets for language analysts, and I'm still a language analyst, so I have to go where there's a billet for a language analyst. And he said, well, I find that you do the best where there's no space for you, so let's make a space for you. And I said, hey, you're the senior master sergeant. If you can make that happen, sure, I'll go into this. I had no idea what I was going to do with it, but I just knew, all right, this seems like the new next big challenge. Let's go for it. And when I showed up, literally no one knew what to do with me. They were like, you don't do programming, you don't hack, you don't understand, you can't reverse engineer a piece of malware. And I said, but I do speak Chinese, and I'm pretty sure all those people that are conducting all the operations, they speak Chinese. So you would think that maybe I could figure out what they were trying to do before they were hacking you. Maybe break some passwords, maybe help you there. And they were like, all right, we'll see now. Okay, we're interested. But I had to really fight. Our operators were, cultishly not really inclusive of our analysts. And so in my fashion, I basically just stalked them to the point where if they ignored me, I'd log into their computers in the morning in their building so that they had to talk to me to get me off their computer. And then I showed up one night on an op and they let me in and they were going to cancel. And I said, hey, you know, if you just click that, you could get rid of that screen. And they were like, wait, you read the wingdings? I said, I do read the wingdings. So let me help you. And they were like, this is amazing. You need to be on every op. And I was like, I can't believe you've been doing this without one of me for all of these years. I'm a little terrified, right? Like, I was like, how can we do this? And then this kind of partnership came and we developed that, the cyber persona mission, where we really started looking at the humans behind all of the hacking. And that really helped give birth to a whole new facet of our mission at NSA that really took off as we were dealing with the just billions of dollars of intellectual property theft that the Chinese were doing, right? And continue to do. But it was really, in some ways, a serendipitous opportunity where somebody saw in me a resiliency and an interest to go into the unknown and helping pave the way to make that happen so that I could enter in and say, okay, you're going to, you know, I'm a language analyst, I can belong here. And then finding a way to really belong. And that's really where I came into cyber. You know, we didn't even really call it cybersecurity at the time. It was information assurance for NSA at the time. And it was really split between these two missions where you had our signals intelligence, where it was really that offensive, and you had our information assurance. But where I sat in NTOC was the cross of the two. We had both authorities, so we could do both. And we really started to play with what that could mean, where you actually brought the smart people who understood the target space and the smart people who understood the technology and the defense. And we said, you need to talk to one another. And a few years ago, when I was asked to join a Tiger team set up by General Nakasone that was going to examine where NSA's cyber mission was and where it was going under the leadership of Rob Joyce at the time, we looked at where our mission really started. And as we explored how we needed to better draw a thread from that all the way over into understanding the adversary, to the keys, codes, and crypto, to the nuclear mission, all the way throughout, we really realized that there was a gap in how we were doing business. And that gap, we started pulling that thread. And what we realized was there was a trajectory we were going on, not just at NSA, but in our industry, that was pushing us more and more in line with looking at the private sector and how they worked and bringing them into our mission space. It had happened in very, very singular instances up until that point. But we sat around a table and I remember having a conversation with Ann Neuberger at the time. And I said, look, if we're going to do this, this is our highest risk that we're going to take in rejuvenating our mission, which means it's no fail. Everything has to be all in if we're going to really start to figure out how we're going to work with industry in this space. And we continue to dig on it and look at what that was going to be. And then what came out of it was the Cybersecurity Collaboration Center, which is now run by Morgan Adamski, who was one of those minds around that table that was like, how are we going to do this? And I know WiCyS had the privilege of listening to Morgan last year in a keynote. I believe it was last year, right, Jess? She did the keynote. The years are starting to blend. And she's really helped to lead us to a space where now we've created both this physical and this virtual environment where industry gets to work alongside the minds within NSA the way that we could never work outside of our classification barriers, right? And by removing all of this, what we're seeing is a more fruitful, just actually proactive mission space that exists. And we're seeing a lot of similarities, but then again, we're seeing these differences come up of where, you know, industry does it one way or they have this aperture and NSA does it a different. And when we put it together, we get more of that fuller picture that allows us to be more proactive and defensive against the adversary. As part of that is my mission. I run the Enduring Security Framework. It's actually the oldest instance now of public-private partnership in an unclassified way. We bring together companies from the IT, DIB, and communications sector, and we target a lot of those really hard problems. I like to say we live in between the strategy and the tactical operational. right? You get a lot of that, we should do these big things, right? We should work 5G and we should do this. But then you get a lot of the, the day-to-day reactive tactical operation coming. But when you're really trying to marry those two together, there aren't many folks that really understand how to take big things and bite them down to be able to have that incremental progress. And that's what the Enduring Security Framework does. And we do it, in large part from the free commitment and intellectual property that our industry partners give us. We currently work on 5G, software supply chain, identity and access management, a lot of really hard problems that we can see happening in real time in classified world, but then bringing in our unclassified partners and being able to solve it that way. But it's been a really incredible mission, and it's interesting because running ESF has opened up a lot more doors for me to engage. And again, it goes back where, when I was selected to run this, they had kept struggling with finding the right person. They kept, no, that's not the right person to run it. No, it had been Ann Newberger's personal, it was her first job at NSA. And so she was really, really particular about who got the job. And when it came time, I had, set up our cybersecurity communications mission. We'd released Hydra. We did our first big vulnerability. I'd uncovered a lot of the great work we were doing in our cybersecurity advisories that no one knew about because we were pushing them to a website that nobody ever went to. And we wanted to get it more into the hands of folks. When Anne came to me and said, okay, I've got your next challenge. It's going to be ESF. You need to give it a new life, give it a new focus. When I look back at why I was selected for that, it wasn't just because of those near-term successes. It was going back to where it all began for me, which was constantly going into the unknown and figuring out how we were going to work through it. And that really was my day one in the Air Force, right? Is, okay, I have no idea what's going to happen. We're now going to be at war. And I'm this kid that's going to go off and become a Chinese language analyst and then figure it out as we go, right? And that resiliency and that kind of adventurous spirit that I think a lot of us probably have. I think to join the military, you have to be you have to be an adventurer, right? By heart. Like, you have to be willing to say, someone's going to tell me where to go, and I'm just going to figure it out from there. I'm going to trust that I'm going to be able to make those decisions. I often tell people I wasn't an analyst when I graduated the Defense Language Institute. I was a linguist. I didn't become an analyst until my boots hit the ground. And I realized, okay, I have this much information to make a decision on, and that's all I get. And it's when you realize, okay, I have to rely on the folks around me and the data I have at hand to make the best decisions possible. That's when you become an analyst. That's when you become that leader and that decision maker, because you're working within the confines of what you have and you understand where to trust your intuition, but have that be data-backed intuition, right? Where you can actually look at the information and then say, this is what I think is right. And this is the path I'm going on. And that's really become a shaping aspect of a lot of my career as I continue to move through. I'm 21 years into this now. And well, I've got decades now, I guess, before I can retire. So I guess a long way to go from here. About to embark on a PCS overseas in the new year, where again, it'll be, you're the first person in this job, go figure out what we're going to do, which I think to me is really exciting. And I would imagine a lot of you also kind of feel this way, being females who joined or somehow became attached to the military in your own personal careers. But I would be remiss to not just talk about a little bit of what it's like to be a veteran at NSA. We have an extremely strong community, and it's one that, because we have a lot of people who go from uniform to civilian, it's just kind of in the fibers of who we are, which I find is very different from a lot of other agencies within the federal government, where our culture is very much influenced by the military, not just because we belong to the Department of Defense, but because the population itself of the people are either used to working with military, or they are or used to be military, which for me always made it feel more comfortable, right? It was something that I understand what it's like. I actually seek out, if I have a team that doesn't have military, or I see an organization that doesn't have a lot of military, it's how can we find some military folks to join it, because they're going to be able to just give you something that you might not be able to get from someone who graduated with a political science degree and came in. That's still great, but it's just different. And you want to have that experience peppered throughout. In fact, somebody who works for me now was my chief years ago. And when I interviewed him, I was like, oh my God, this is super awkward. So, hey, Chief Laurel, I'm not Sergeant Pittore anymore. I'm actually interviewing you to work for me, but I feel like this is wrong because you're amazing. And I remember you when I was in the Air Force, and he's become like my right-hand man in the office and is one of the most incredible just project managers, leaders, and he definitely mentors up for me. And honestly, everywhere I go, I will try to drag him there because he's just that fantastic. But once I got him and he joined the team, it started, you just started seeing new things come to life. And he's a 30-year military veteran, right? He can't help but do it. It's who he is. And he just brought a whole new side. He brought all these great qualities out in the people around him. We have a very active employee resources group. Our veterans program is actually really fantastic. And they talk about the hard things, right? Just the other day, there was a note on, dealing with PTSD and how you manage that within the workforce, and offering classes and opportunities to engage in a way that you can make sure you feel safe, because there's such a stigma still around that when you have a security clearance, unfortunately. And I love that. I love that. I don't think I go more than 2 days without a note from the ERG to our workforce on what's going on, what resources are available, who's volunteering to mentor, is looking for a mentor. And so it's really become, it's just part of who we are. I had the great opportunity to be an exec to Rick Leggett, who is also a veteran. He was a Morse code operator, more on the signal side when he was active. And there was a concern he had that we would hit a point in NSA's just culture and population that we weren't going to have as many veterans. It was actually a concern for him, because he knew how important they were. In fact, it was because of him that they actually started a course that when you become a chief, when you get your S as being a supervisor, you actually have to take a class on how to interact and manage military. You actually have to be educated. You cannot do your job as a leader without taking that course. And I kind of giggled because when my training came up and I had to take it again after the window, I was like, I find it funny that I have to take this because I get it, right? Like I know they have PT, I know that they have multiple responsibilities, but I actually, as a mature person in my organization, I appreciated it so much that there was so much thoughtfulness that went into it, that we were, we're helping educate those that aren't as familiar with who we are and why we are the way that we are as either active or veterans or Guard or Reserve. That we actually take the time to say, here's how you engage, here's how you talk, here's how you work with your military, both employees and colleagues. And I absolutely love that about where we are. It's a very inclusive environment for those of us that are associated. Even now, I'm a military spouse. My husband is 22 years Air Force. He retires on 1 December, just in time for us to make a major international move, and our kind of roles get reversed. And as a spouse, one of the things I love about the collaboration center is my husband travels, and there's been times where he goes out and you don't know when he's coming back. And you're like, I wish I could tell you if he was coming back in a week or 3 weeks or 3 months, but it just depends on his missions. And the flexibility to work from home and to be able to say, hey, I'm dealing with both my kids by myself. Everything will still get done. It's just going to get done differently. It might be that I start at 4 a.m. so that I have a good 4 hours in before I drop my kids off at daycare. And then I'll be in the office, but I have to pick them up. And I can't always be that last mom calling and saying, I'm really sorry, it's traffic, when it's like, no, it's not. You took a 5 o'clock meeting and now you're racing to get your kids because you're the last one at the daycare, right? But it's, it's such an inclusive and flexible and supportive environment for things like that. So I appreciate it now as a military spouse when I feel that pain of my husband being gone and it's just you, and not only are you dealing with your 2 kids and whatever's going on with work, you're doing it by yourself, right? Where you don't have necessarily someone right there. helping you with pickup and drop off. And so seeing the way our culture has evolved to be, you know, inclusive of that working mom demands and what that takes, I cannot appreciate enough, because it's literally, I don't know how I would function anymore without this kind of, you know, flexibility and lifestyle. Um, I have tons. You know, Jess and I were talking about this after the prep. I have almost too many stories from my time in the military. Some that are fond memories. Some I remember the first time I yelled at um, somebody who outranked me because he told me I couldn't pick something up because I was a girl, and it was like a side table when I was a DLI. And I was like, excuse me? He's like, you can't wait for one of the boys. The boys will get it. And even though that thing was so heavy, I was like, this mother effer is getting down that hallway. And I'm not accepting help from anybody just to prove the point to this guy that I can carry it down there. And it was so painful. And I was probably like screaming by the end of it, but I was like, I'm moving this thing. I was like, and I got it down there and he looked at me and I was like, so does anything need to be said? Right? Like, you're not going to tell me I can't pick something up. I'll get it from point A to point B, just the same, right? I used to tell them all the time. Every time a ship came in Hawaii, where they were volunteering for language analysts to go out on it, there were no female berths on the ship, but I applied every time, every single time. And every time they come back and they'd say, Nat, you know, they're not going to pick you. And I said, yeah, but I'm going to make you tell me every time that you're not picking me because I'm a girl, not because I'm not a talented language analyst, not because I can't handle the deployment. I was like, I want you to have to tell me every single time that the reason I can't go is because I'm a woman. Because one day that's going to change. One day you're going to make a room where I can sleep and I don't have to be concerned with all of the, you know, risks that a woman on a male dominated, you know, floating city have. I said, but the fact that I can't go on there isn't because I'm a girl. It's because of the men who can't control themselves, or the fact that you have a situation that isn't conducive to my gender, right? And every time they'd shake their heads, and I'm like, but you know what? Document it. Document in there that you're not letting me go because I'm a woman. I was like, because otherwise, I guarantee you, I would be your top performer on that ship, right? But I kept every time that port came in and they asked for volunteers, I was always the first person in line, and I was always the first person told no. But I kept volunteering. You know what? Because until somebody hears you, right, to say, wait a second, what are we doing wrong? Couldn't we sanction a hallway and make it female berths so that we could give these women an opportunity to go, right? You know, I have 2 little girls, and like, if they chose to join the military, I don't want them to be told they can't do a job because they aren't capable of it, right? Tell them what they need to do to get it done, and then let them determine what their capacity is and their potential. Don't tell them no because it's just the rule and it's what's easiest, or it's just because it hasn't been done that way before, right? And so yeah, I was always kind of that troublemaker that questioned and pushed against the, you know, the grain, because, you know, because we have to, right? It's no different within the cybersecurity mission. I dealt with a lot moving into it where folks just didn't want to pay me any mind, in uniform and outside of uniform. In fact, I remember I had a theory on an attribution to an intrusion set that I was pretty certain it was right. It had a lot of patterns that a lot of analysis that went into it. And I was in a meeting with the FBI. I don't know if any of you work or are FBI, but you're probably familiar with the culture, especially when it's an agent. And everyone was sitting around the table and I was against the wall, and they're all noodling over this. And I'm like, see, but here's the thing. I said my piece, and they literally just talked as if I had never said anything. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, did I say something? Like, am I that stupid? Like, did I say something that like they had ruled out? And I remember a colleague of mine who's still one of my dearest friends, Aaron Sims, and one of the most just aggressive cheerleaders for strong women. In fact, he married an intern of mine that is probably one of the smartest, most lethal women I've ever met in my life. I'm just glad she's on our side, Tanya Sims at the NSA. And he said what I had said, and everyone was like, oh, Eureka, that's it, right? And I was like, you gotta be freaking kidding me. And I was angry for a moment, but then Aaron said, well, you know, Natalie said that 5 minutes ago. And it wasn't until he had called it out, and he said, why don't you push your chair up here, Nat? Why don't you tell them why you think that? And I thought, wow, you know, I'm probably equally appreciative to Aaron making that space for me, but also angry that everyone just ignored me because they didn't add any validity to what I said. But, you know, being able to make that room for someone, I think is incredibly important, especially as us being women in this together. We're, you know, we're 24% of the community. And often, you know, I know Jen Easterly talked about this a lot in Ohio this year at the WiCyS convention, right? We're 24%, but you're seeing more of us, right? And I think, you know, you have people on both sides. You have the people who say that's not necessarily great because they're finding and saying, put the women on so that it looks like we have representation. But then on the other side of that, it's right, if you don't put the women forward, then who do the girls see when they look up, right? You want to make sure that those of us, that 24% that can be forward, are present. Because when you see yourself in a mission or you see yourself in an opportunity, you're going to make different decisions, even from being really little, right? All the way up, because you're going to say, I could do that, right? That could be me. There isn't something I can't do because I can see people who look at me like me, right? And I thought that was something that was so strong and amazing at the, you know, WiCyS event this year, as being someplace where I was like, man, I will stand in the line at a bathroom any day at a cybersecurity event if that means that there's this many women here, right? Like, that is exciting to see how strong of a force and how, you know, nurturing of a community it is for one another. But I want to make sure that there's time for all of you, and I would love to hear or ask, you know, answer any questions. Is there anything that the group really wants to explore or talk about, or that's on your it's kind of on your mind? I cannot believe this many women are quiet.
Can I come off mute and ask? Natalie, thank you so much for being here today. All the stories you shared, I was like trying to write everything down, and the data, the back end intuition, you know, just the data backed information that you have. So thank you for sharing that with us. Can you kind of give us a little bit more as to the NSA, what was that called?
Our collaboration center?
Yes, please.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I can actually talk about that like probably too much. Jess is laughing. So so our cybersecurity collaboration center, it's amazing. It is it's a predominantly unclassified work center that's just outside Fort Meade. So actually, when we were building it, there were some folks who argued this needs to be in DC near all the other agencies. But then it was actually industry people that said, not for NSA. People want to feel close to the mothership. When they come, they want to still feel like they're in NSA. And that's not really the same in DC. So we found some place outside the fence line where, you know, we don't have to take blood samples and put you through polygraphs for you to come in and talk to us. It's literally like, hey, I'm bringing someone in from company X that wants to talk about Chinese intrusion sets. Just give me this information and I can have it processed within 24 hours and you can come in and we can have a meeting. And it's really where we're able to share unclassified and classified information within the right setting and the right cleared clearances to be able to really start making ground against the adversary, right? You know, when I talk to our industry partners, I feel sometimes like I have to remind them, you know, when we're looking at Russia, when we're looking at China, when we're looking at these other near peer adversaries, you know, we still have something they do not have. We have the strongest economic base, right? The strongest companies and innovation that exists in the world. And when you bring that together with the brilliancy that lives within the NSA, that is an asymmetric advantage for us. And that's what the Collaboration Center brings to the front lines, is that we're able to give you access to the people. You know, I'm a Chinese cyber analyst through and through. Like, I still geek out on it. When people are like, oh, what can you recommend a good book? I'm like, well, if you haven't read Sandworm, trust me. And I've had like everyone in my family read Sandworm. And they're like, and all of them, like my mother-in-law, who knows nothing about this. She was an HR chief in Pittsburgh. She's like, it's really an interesting book. I'm like, right, that's my life. Like, I worked on that stuff. It's cool, isn't it? Right? Because it's understandable and they see it now. It's on the front page. It's a part of, you know, who we are day to day. And that's what the Collaboration Center does, is it allows us to bring people you would not have access to, information you would not have access to, because it's one thing to share indicators, right? We know now they're perishable. There's just too much. We're not really helping our defenders by saying, here's an IP address, block it. That's not helpful. But when we bring those defenders that are out there within, the defense industrial base, and we say, who you really need to talk to is this person who's our, smartest person when it comes to ransomware. And you guys just have a conversation. Like, bring the context, the intellect, the theories, the thoughts, bring them together and talk about them. And when you're able to do that, you go beyond the data. You're still in the data. You're still rooted in it, right? Because we just, by who we are as signatories, or fact, right? Or fact based, you're still doing that. But you're able to say, well, I saw this, and knowing the pattern of the adversary and the fact that I did this 5 years ago or 10 years ago, they were on this trajectory, it gets us to a better place to be able to be more proactive. And so we really saw that, we see it in instances like what was going on in Russia, Ukraine, right? These, as we're looking, as a China person, I look at Russia, Ukraine, and then I think mainland China, Taiwan, right? Like that's what scares, I'm like, this terrifies me. But then what scares me even more is that I know that the Chinese Communist Party is watching this, and they're seeing how the world is reacting to Ukraine, and they're thinking, okay, now replace it, make it mainland, make it Taiwan. What are they going to do next? How, where are those power positions? And so when you're really able to get into those conversations and you're not worried about, you can talk freely with your partners within industry, it's what's really giving us this whole new part of our mission. The other thing that's really cool about the Collaboration Center is because it's unclassified, we have a very unique position where we get to work from home. And the reality is, a lot of people want that nowadays, right? Like, that is, as a working mom, like, there's part of me who's a little bit terrified of not having work from home anymore. I mean, I'm literally I'm on vacation and I'm able to sit down and talk to you all, but that's because of the platform that was created within the Collaboration Center. And so being able to fit your life into your work, and I kind of call it, it's working from everywhere. And I'm a strong believer that we live in a work-life out of balance lifestyle, right? Sometimes it's all about what's going on at work, and other things have to understand, like, husband, children, you have to understand that there's crisis, and that means more of my time may be spent doing this. But then other times it's like, it's my 4-year-old's dance recital, and you bet I'm going to be that mom with the pins and the flowers, and I'm going to, like the whole thing, Skywriter, like she's there, and it's like, right now, that's the most important thing. But really, it's just us having that resiliency and ability to be able to move and be able to be buoyant so that we can manage and move between these different roles that have been, asked of us in the way that our society is now. And the Collaboration Center has found a way to be able to work our cybersecurity mission at NSA, do it with industry, but then also have that flexibility and that work from home lifestyle that you really don't get in traditional NSA missions. So it really is a unique place coming together. We work very closely with our other government partners. So there's a lot of interaction with CISA, FBI, ODNI, the White House. There's a lot of engagement just with academia, where we're bringing students in, we're talking to universities, we're talking to centers of academic excellence, and NSA is involved with, and we're making this kind of an extension and a really accessible part of our world. And I think that I think it's wonderful. You can actually go on nsa.gov. We have a page there of all the information. We work standards and certifications. Some of the smartest people I've ever had the opportunity to work with that are writing standards for 5G and 6G and cloud and post quantum, that lives within the Collaboration Center. We're doing a lot of wonderful work on the defense industrial base defense, where we're actually creating services that we're offering for free for small and medium-sized div companies to help them, because it's like, hey, we know the adversary is doing this to you. If we can make it easier for you and be able to create something that you can just sign up for, and if that makes you more defended, it means we're more defended. It means, we're more secure as a nation. And so we're finding new and creative ways to be able to offer div defense services to actually help raise that security level of our entire defense industrial base, which is really incredible. And we're doing a lot of our bilateral and multilateral industry engagement there as well. So it really is, it's just this new part of the way that we do business in NSA, and I only see it growing. And those of you who had the opportunity to listen or have talked to Morgan Adamski can tell she is a woman with a mission, and she is building something that is truly remarkable. And I'm, I consider it a privilege to work for her, to be able to work with her and realizing this mission, but it really comes from the vision. And honestly, I actually think it comes from the allowance of our senior leaders to let those of us who might have been lower in the totem pole, that felt this is where things can go, empower us to explore, and they took a risk, right? And I think that's something that's really remarkable with General Nakasone and Rob Joyce and Ann Newberger, is they listened to what sometimes felt like just a ragtag team of folks that says, hey, this is really where the future is. This is where we need to go. And they said, all right, go do it, right? But just do it by this date, and here's all this pressure and everything we expect from it. And then they said, okay, now do it, but do it. What do they like to say? To scale, Jess, make it bigger, times it by 100, do it, and I'm like, hey, if anyone's going to do it, it's going to be Morgan, right? 100%, hands down, betting on that woman, right? But yeah, it's this incredible pocket of innovation that really gives a lot of opportunity for us to be able to work, and connect across the entire community, because this community has grown a lot in the past 10 years. It's, I also find it, not surprising that a lot of former NTalkers and NSAers went out into industry and helped really build a lot of these companies, right? But that was because they saw vision, right? And they took it there. We love that entrepreneurial mindset. Like, we're stronger because of that. So we love it. We did an NSA alumni meetup at RSA, and I thought it was so much fun to see all the people that are out there in industry now that, we had the opportunity to work with when they were in NSA 10, 15 years ago, right? We're just trying to build that kind of ecosystem and an almost revolving door of talent. So highly encourage you, look it up. It's absolutely fantastic. Are there any other questions? Or is there anything else you all want to hear about?
So Natalie, thank you so much for sharing your experiences. I think that's just like absolutely fabulous. And I know a lot of us, especially sort of identify with like needing to see strong women leaders that we can look up to, right? That to say, hey, look, somebody else did this, we could do this too. And so I know a lot of our folks here are sort of in the space right now where they're trying to get into cyber, or they're newly into cyber. And I know the NSA has a talent shortage, right? Everyone has a talent shortage. So I know you guys are hiring. So can you talk to us a little bit about some of the skills our folks would love to hear about? What are you guys looking for? What are you looking for? Deep technical experience? Are you looking for people who can talk cyber to the business? Are you looking for a mix of in between? Can you elaborate a little bit for us?
Absolutely. And I would say it's all of the above. One of the things I love about the cybersecurity mission, right, is that we're at a place with it where we don't just want the traditional, I have a degree in cybersecurity, or I'm an engineer or a mathematician. We want them, right? I mean, obviously we want them. But I think, we need people with business acumen that maybe you have, a degree in business management or accounting or something that has given you unique experience, and now you're just really looking at a way to apply it. Language analysts and folks like me who came from a completely different background, marketing, right? I look at the Jess and the Kellys who are on the call. It is so hard to find talented communications and marketing professionals that think, oh, I'm going to go to NSA. That's probably a place where they need some people with some marketing and creative experience. And it's like, no, we do. You may not think of it, but you count yourself out, right? Because you're like, that's for the people who understand post-quantum cryptography and things. Yes, it is, but it's also for the people who understand how to speak to other humans, right? We need managers. We need people who understand with emotional intelligence and understand people, HR, budget, things like that. But I think the beauty about looking at it from a cybersecurity perspective is not just to look at, what I have on paper, what's my degree, but what is it that you want to do? And then start looking at what are those jobs that give you that fulfillment. So, for me, it's like, I want to be in a place where I'm solving really hard problems that maybe other people are too afraid to broach, that there's some risk of failure. I mean, I don't necessarily like that anything I would perceive as a failure happens in front of like the Secretary of Defense and General Nakasone and Director Easterly, because I mean that's kind of terrifying. But you know, the stakes are up, right? I like that. That to me is the challenge of it. But I didn't get that job because I had a degree in computer engineering, right? I got that job because I could demonstrate over years, this is what I'm able to produce, right? So I would encourage you and those of you that are here to look at what was strong and what you did from maybe your previous life. How do you take that and apply it and see how you see it within the cybersecurity mission? Because we're just, you know, it's everywhere. Sorry, cyber is everywhere. It's in every industry. And if it's not, then they're at risk, and someone needs to tell them that they need people that understand this. If you don't feel like you have fully matured skills and that you want to explore, that's where things like our development programs come in. Our development programs are insane. I cannot sing their praises enough. In fact, I'm a little bit envious. I was a direct hire out of the Air Force. They were like, we want you in here in uniform on Friday, and then you're going to be a civilian on Monday. And then looking back on it, I was like, man, I should have gone a development program, because it could have given me 2 to 3 years to just kind of dance across the agency and experience all these different missions that build that tapestry of what my experience is. But they're really made for people that are in transition, that are new, that have raw skills, raw potential, or raw talent that we just want to hone, polish, and train you on. And it's, I mean, you get paid that same salary, right? It's not like you're paid less because you're in a development program. There's still opportunity for advancement, for recognition, for contributions to the mission. And there's so many of them. In fact, I just uncovered a new one the other day. I had someone who reached out to me to come intern for me that does our cybersecurity strategic analysis. And I was like, I didn't even know this development program existed. Tell me more. And at the end of the 30 minutes, I was like, so when's your next tour? Because it's in the collaboration center, in case you didn't know, because we're taking you because this is amazing and we need people like you. But they were like, he's like, I can write. I'm more of a strategic thinker. I'm not necessarily a connect the dots, look at the SIGINT in between, you know, different pieces, you know, emails and such. He was somebody who could write assessments and look at things and be able to put together large trends and stuff. And that's how he was hired into this development program. And I was like, what an incredible opportunity, from network, you know, operators to mathematicians. You know, we joke that we take mathematicians and we teach them real math, because we have math you can't learn anyplace else other than at NSA, right? These are all done through development programs and internships. And so whether you're in college, whether you're in high school, whether you've graduated and you're just looking for, you know, how do I do an entry-level job, but I still want to grow and move, that's an incredible opportunity. So if you look at intelligencecareers.gov, a lot of that information is there. But when you're looking, you know, right, and I'm sure you've all heard this, every resume tailored to the job that you're going to apply for, right? It takes that time. I don't know that everyone takes that time to look and see, what is this job actually asking for, and how can I demonstrate that I've in some way done that in my experiences before. And yes, it means it's extra time, but if you really want that job, you'll take it. Take that time, read that job ad. When I was applying for my next job that I start in January, I can't tell you how many times I read and I asked folks, like, what will make me the strongest candidate? How do I ensure that I'm giving myself the best chance that I have of getting that job because I really want it? Look at that and then tailor that resume in order to live it. But look at the job and then think about it. And if you know, is this what I want to be doing? Do I want to be analyzing adversary communications, or do I want to be more on that network defense side? Because there's any type of opportunity within NSA. And if you have questions, I mean, reach out. People like me, people like Jess, people like Kelly, we're happy to offer. You know, I was actually just in a class at Harvard, and a woman came up to me and she said, it's my daughter's dream job to work at NSA. And I was like, well, what does she do? And she's like, she's a mathematician. I was like, well, it's our dream job to hire her. Like, link us. And she's like, really? And then I put her in touch with the person who runs our math development program. And I was like, all right, please tell this very smart young woman who wants to come to NSA, but had her internship canceled due to COVID, how to kind of get in there. And so they started down that path. And actually, there was a woman at WiCyS I interviewed earlier this year who starts with us actually really soon. You know, gave her an on the job, you know, on the spot job offer because she was impressive. And everything came through. Now she's coming to join our workforce, right? So really like ask those questions, build that network, look at those job descriptions, see if you see yourself in it and if it's going to get you what it is you want to be doing. Because there's so many ways to traverse and move within the agency that really the sky's the limit. You can move across it. Like I consider myself consistently like a phoenix. Like I'll do a job and then it's like poof, it's up in flames and it's like, okay, here's a new job. Let's go, you know, and it might be totally different than the one that I had before it, right? That's one of the things that's amazing about where we live and work within this industry. If you all have questions and you want to shoot me emails or whatever, or contact via LinkedIn, by all means, please don't hesitate to reach out. I know Liz and Kristen have my email addresses. There may be other questions, or if you don't want to talk in front of the group or your kids are running across your computer while you're trying to listen.
I kind of have one. So I'm a career changer, military spouse. I'm trying to break into cybersecurity right now. Sorry, I started talking, my dog's freaking out. Is there a good space for that at the NSA, like for an entry-level job, or do you have to get some experience first and then apply?
So, you can do it both ways, right? You can do it as entry level and look at, like, as I said, look at the experience that you have. Even it may not directly apply right now, to that job that you're applying for. It can still be relevant experience, especially with how you present it. But we're really looking for both, because those unique experiences and that, those fresh perspectives, they really help our mission. So I would say, looking at intelligencecareers.gov, look at those development programs, look at those jobs that are interest of you, and also look up, we will post, if you don't follow us on Twitter, I would highly recommend it, because we will have recruiters at events all the time. And we do like crazy hiring days. Like I do these speed dating days where they put a whole bunch of us in a room at like a convention center or in a conference center in a hotel. And it'll be like thousands of applicants. And we just sit there and we interview people and we say, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And you could walk out of there with a job offer, right? And so it's a good way to be able to put yourself in front of a person if you don't want to rely on that paper or that virtual application. It's like there's tons of great ways in order to pursue, and even if it's just to connect. So seek out, like if NSA is really of interest to you, seek out where we're going to be, because there's a lot of opportunity to talk and meet. And we'll be at WiCyS again, right, Jess? I'm pretty sure we sponsor. We'll be there again. Go to the WiCyS conference and come up to our booth. We're actively recruiting there. So entry level, new, by all means, right? This is a young field. So, you've got teenagers now doing things in this business, right? Doesn't take a lot of experience. It just takes the right motivation.
And I just want to piggyback off that real quick, Natalie, because that's amazing. And anyone here who's part of our WiCyS military affiliate, you should know that there are so many scholarships available for folks to go to the WiCyS conference. Going to a conference is not cheap, right? You have to pay airfare, you have to pay hotel, you have to pay the registration fee, which can be hundreds of dollars all by itself. You're looking at sometimes thousands of dollars to go to these conferences. WiCyS does its absolute best to try to make this easier for everyone. I've been twice on a military veteran scholarship as part of the other program with WiCyS that I'm a part of. I know Kristen as well. Hopefully we'll be getting there pretty soon, right? And we're very excited. So if you are part of our affiliate, if you haven't joined yet, please feel free to join us up. You can email us, and there are so many scholarship opportunities, and WiCyS does hundreds of scholarships every year just to get folks in the door so that you can talk to wonderful people like Jess and Natalie and Kelly.
So I have a question for you if no one else has any questions. I'm wondering what advice you have for women like navigating workplace politics. Like that's been one of my biggest challenges. And so I'm curious, since you've kind of done it all, what tips do you have?
Yeah, so it's funny. I find that one of the most important things I learned actually from the Air Force, which was to have integrity above all else, right? When you're dealing in the workplace. I always, I tell my kids, right, if you have to give me a story or an excuse after of why you did something, you've already lost me, right? And so when I move into situations, complicated situations in the workplace, I like to, for me, I have to be able to confidently know that right was on my side because I entered into it with integrity. But I'm also, and Jess can attest to this, I'm also not shy. And so if there is something that is not right that's going on, or if there's a situation that I disagree with, I don't necessarily abide by being silent or filling any type of stereotypical female role that people like to associate or put on us in the workplace. I'm a chain of, there's so many things that it came from the military, right? Of a chain of command person. If I have a problem with someone, it's let's sit down and talk about it. Like, let's just sit down as two human beings. Because honestly, it was probably communication that got us there. And whether it's, perceived disrespect, perceived wrongdoings, a lot of times I've found that the situation can be resolved just from talking to the person. Now, I've had encounters, I actually had a man who recently raised his voice to me in a meeting in front of people that I was like, that was completely inappropriate. People came up to me after and they were like, that was inappropriate. And at first I was very polite, like, we'll manage it, we're in front of people. And then it kept escalating. And I was like, okay, well, now I have to own my space here and be able to, as long as anyone who walked out of there said, Natalie handled herself well, I was professional, I didn't go to a level that I would regret. Sometimes you have to push back. You just have to do it with that dignity, right? That, you have to respect me here, right? Everything has to be grounded in mutual respect. But also, I tell people, barriers aren't put to keep people away. They're put to be able to protect yourself, so you have the bandwidth to be able to handle things. And so if I now have this barrier up to you because of the way that you're behaving, it's because I'm actually protecting you in this situation, not myself, in a sense, because it's a matter of we need to come to a place where we could talk through this. And if it doesn't work, then that's what our bosses are there for. So now let's sit down and we can have that conversation, right? And so I would say, have that integrity, be able to know that, often I stop and think about it. I've actually, I do a lot of yoga and I practice it a lot in the workplace. If there's something that frustrates me, take a moment and take a breath, because it's often in that breath I'm able to find a new way to manage myself in the situation so that I'm not, at any, risk of being irrational or acting out of emotions. In fact, oftentimes, if I'm going to send the email to the person, I'll type it up and then I'll save it in draft. And then I'll go back 20 minutes or an hour later and then I'll read it and I'll say, okay, here's where maybe you're a little charged in your language. That's not needed. It's not going to help the situation. Get rid of it, right? You don't need to address that, right? Because and then that exercise almost helps me, because sometimes it's like, you don't even need to send this now. Now that you read it, you're like, what's actually going to come? Like, what's the resolution I'm looking for? Is how am I going to engage going to get me to that resolution? And if not, it's okay, how do I go back? Because really it's, you're the only person that you can control, right? So those interactions, you have to think, how am I reacting to the situation? I actually also do a lot of witness meditations, where if I'm in a situation that I'm like, I didn't like the way it turned out, or I want to ask myself, did I handle it the best way I think I could have? I'll actually do an observation where I'll replay it in my mind, watching not as myself, but watching myself in the situation. And that's where I'm able to say, okay, maybe you were tired. Maybe the way you said that could have had another impact on someone who had something else going on. And we're all bringing our stories to the workplace and our lives to the workplace. And so I'll kind of force myself to look and say, what could you have done differently or better in that situation? And then learn from that, so that I'm seeing myself not as me, right? But as how other people may perceive me, so that I'm growing and being able to self-evaluate and make changes where, you know, it's like, it may have been a good intention, but the way I approached it was not right for the situation, or it wasn't right for that person, right? Because not everyone wants to be handled or responded or treated the same way. And so that I think has made the workforce, like politics in the workplace, just easier, right? Because you're bringing your whole self, you're respecting that other people are bringing their whole self, and that mindfulness, I think, actually leads to where very rarely do I have conflicts on my teams or with my folks, or if they're there, I'm at least acknowledging why it's there, and is it a healthy conflict, because that needs to be there. But we have to be able to do it in a way that's respectful and people leave challenged, but not upset, right? You know, it's okay to be challenged. It's okay to disagree, just as long as we're doing it in a way that is helping us all move forward, right, together. So, but I will say that witness meditation is incredibly powerful if you start to practice it, because it really starts you to see yourself in relation to your environment in a way that I didn't, like I wish I would have known it 20 years ago, because it probably would have matured me even faster, right?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you. I hadn't heard of that, so I'll check it out.
Yeah. Awesome.
Well,
Well,
I guess
if
if
there's,
nobody else has any questions, thank you so much for
yeah,
taking the time to talk to our group tonight. This is amazing.
yeah, happy to. And hopefully I'll run into you all at WiCyS events, and feel free to reach out. Like I said, I'm on LinkedIn. You can contact me via email. Always happy to give some advice, do a call, whatever's needed, right? We need you all in the workforce. I'd love to see some of you at NSA one day. So, you know, I appreciate you all for having this dedication and support for the community.
Awesome. Well, I
Awesome.
guess we'll close out for tonight. Thank you everyone for attending,
you.
and we'll see you next month. Good night.
Good night, everyone.